Okay, now it's recorded. Sorry,
Well, that's cool.
that's good. Okay. So our plan is to record this so it's available online. Okay, so just a little bit of background on the project itself. Probably a year and a half ago or so, there was a lot of activity down around the Big Fork area that one of my former colleagues, Christina Relier, noticed, and it was after a significant hailstorm passed through the Big Fork area. Anybody here from Big Fork? Are you? You seen it? Yeah. So there was a hailstorm that came through with about 2.5-inch size hail, significant. So it kind of pummeled the trees, and it very quickly caused the decline or browning of ponderosa trees within the Big Fork area. So we started speculating, like, what's going on? Is it just the hail damage? Or we also started thinking that there might be a disease outbreak of something called diplodia. Diplodia is a disease that will impact damaged trees, especially ones that have undergone physical damage. And then after a little bit more field investigation, we're like, oh, I'm not sure if it's just the hail and just diplodia. It almost looks like there's something else going on. And then we started noticing exit holes within the trunk of the tree. And that's a telltale sign of beetle, right? Beetle activity is going on. So, something that I always kind of say is, first we thought 1 strike, hail, 2 strikes, diplodia, and now we're at the 3-strike level. And what happens whenever you get 3 strikes is usually it's not very successful. So our goal then was to expand this to the Flathead Valley, not just Big Fork area, because we realized there's a little bit of a bigger problem than just the hail damage that occurred. So this is just a rough sketch map of where ponderosa stands might exist. And you're somewhere down here in that neck of the woods, right? Is that accurate?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So this is a remote sensing project saying this is the likelihood of where ponderosa stands might occur. Some of it's right, some of it's horribly wrong, and some of it's okay. So anyways, remote sensing gives us just a kind of a good start to evaluating where ponderosa might occur. So with that said, we're really interested in understanding the impact of some of these things, western pine beetle in particular, the impact of ponderosa pine throughout the entire valley. So with that, it started kind of more or less last spring, where we were engaging our students. Some of you guys were involved in the early onset of the project, where we were trying to figure out what kind of data we needed to collect to understand the issue that's going on. And we went through kind of a data development process, and then we developed a protocol and an actual survey for us to be able to collect this data. And today we're entering our phase 2 part of the project, is engaging with citizen scientists that can go out and actually help collect some data to help us understand what's occurring throughout the valley. So how many of you guys have heard of citizen science before? You guys have you participated in any citizen science projects? All right, so citizen science is what's your understanding of it. What is a citizen science project?
If you go out and collect data for a project.
Yeah, so you're basically going to be the boots in the ground, the eyes in the field, that's going to collect the data that's going to support a research, or kind of a bigger research thing. There's a lot of cool citizen science projects that occur, especially within Glacier National Park. So you could do pika, you could do mountain goats, you could do loons. We have enough loony people in this room. No, I'm joking. Anyway, so there's a lot of different types of projects that you can undertake as a citizen scientist that really helps us complete the picture. Lastly is the 3rd phase, which we're not yet into, but after we start getting some data from citizen science and students, we'll be able to analyze it and look at it from a perspective to see if we can understand the potential relationships between where trees are declining and which trees are showing resiliency, and ultimately maybe help us manage these resources even a little bit better. So with that said, again, this is a citizen science project that accomplishes a lot. And the biggest thing, don't read the slide, is it accomplishes the ability for us to collect data that just students and researchers can't collect. either just limited resources and also access as well. So, you think about where you're gonna maybe be able to map some ponderosa pines, maybe on private ground, maybe on your own property. I can't just go onto somebody's property and start mapping trees without getting their permission, which is somewhat challenging for a large scale project like this. So that's where you guys come into play. If you're willing, interested, you'll be able to map some of the ponderosa pines throughout the valley and conduct a health assessment, which you'll be trained on later on tonight. All right. Now, one cool thing about the Citizen Science Project is that you'll be able to actually see your own data in real time be added to a map product or something we call a dashboard. Everybody knows what dashboards are after the COVID epidemic, right? You guys are all checking out some of those dashboards. We have created a dashboard that can track the data that's being collected by volunteers. So I'll show you guys this at the end of the session, but I just want to particularly show you guys this dashboard at the bottom of the page where you can see individual data points that are added based on surveys being taken out in the field. You can get some information about all of those trees that are within the geographic extent. Right now, there's just kind of a distribution of the quality, whether they're poor, fair, healthy, or moderate. How many trees have beetle exit holes? 29 trees that do, 46 trees that don't. And the neat thing about that is this data is going to change as I zoom in. So it's going to be relative to the position of those particular points in the map that you're viewing. You can also click on individual points to see information about the trees that are being mapped and also see pictures that are captured. Now, you'll be contributing to this. And again, as soon as you hit submit on a form that you're going to be exposed to soon, it gets mapped right away. And again, we can use that data with future analysis too. All right. So with that said, being covered up, basically citizen science is a great way for you guys to get involved in a project that you're passionate about, but it helps you also to understand the whole picture of the challenge we're running into, especially when it comes to managing our natural resources, and in particular about managing our ponderosa pines. All right, so I'm going to turn this over to, oops, sorry. Get that to go away. There it goes. I'm going to turn this over to Aspen, and she's going to give you a little bit of background on Tree ID.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it as students. Tim mentioned it, but your part is really important, and we're excited to get all of your data so that we can do more work. So to start, we're going to make sure everybody knows how to properly identify a ponderosa. Are you all familiar with your trees in the area? Is anybody not really sure? Okay, well, let's go over it quick. So the pine cone, there's some all around the room. It's pretty obvious. It's a round cone, and it's 3 to 6 inches long, usually the standard shape. The needles are also a sure way to know. They have 3 per fascicle, which is the little bud where it connects. So when you look in here, each of these bundles will have 3. So you can always count it just to make sure. And they're also long needles. They're longer than some of the other pines we have, like lodgepole. The crown is nice and round and usually towards the upper part of the tree, 1/3 or 2/3. The bark is the cinnamony orange color there, and we have these logs in the room to look at. And it's also very platey and puzzle piecey. I'm sure you've heard of that before, ponderosas. Yep, the cone's prickly. I'll have them on your desk. And then here we have some young citizen scientists identifying. Does anyone know how they're identifying?
Smelling. Like
Yes.
vanilla.
Yep. Ponderosas smell sweet like vanilla or butterscotch. So while you're out there, you should smell them if you haven't.
Yeah, go sniff a tree.
Yeah. Yep, that's all I have for our ID lesson. So now Bella will go.
Hi, I'm Bella. I'm gonna help you guys
ID and understand the insects and diseases that will ask you some questions on during the survey. Our first main damaging agent is the western pine beetle. This beetle is species specific, so they only attack ponderosa pines. They won't attack any of your other trees. They're pretty little, about 5 millimeters long as an adult, and the larvae are about 7 or more millimeters long. So the larvae are actually larger than the adults, which I think is really silly. Like I said earlier, the host is ponderosa pine only, but the tree also has to be larger than 6 inches in diameter. So if you can put your hands around it, it's going to be too small for the beetle to infect. So we're mostly looking at trees that are larger than 6 inches. These beetles usually only attack trees that are already stressed by other damages, such as other diseases, drought, lightning. In our case, hail is a main factor. And it's backwards. Okay, great. So, some damage that beetles can cause to trees, specifically ponderosa. First off, the adults are going to bore through the bark to lay their eggs on the inside of the bark. And if you look in front of you, you can see, let me see, I don't have one in front of me. You can see their galleries are kind of like spaghetti pouch and meandering. They don't, oh, I'm going backwards. Sorry. There we go. Yeah. Let me just set that down so I don't cause any more problems. So yeah, their galleries are meandering and winding and overlap. They're kind of like just some spaghetti thrown onto a plate, whereas most beetles will make these perfectly straight lines. So it's pretty easy to tell the difference between a western pine beetle and other bark beetles based on the galleries. Also, while the bark beetles are boring into the trees will try to mount a defense by sending this resin called pitch, which is a mixture of sap and water, to the hole to try and plug it up to stop the beetle from entering the tree. You can see a little example of that down there. There's a little beetle trying to do right through. If a tree is extremely stressed due to drought, then it can't mount a good enough defense. So it could, so the beetles could get through if the tree is too stressed out. After a successful attack, the larva will be laid under the bark and, the eggs will be laid under the bark and the larva will hatch and eat out the living tissue, the cambium of the tree, eventually girdling the tree, killing it. Within a year of initial attack, so the larva will overwinter in the tree and eat the cambium and all that. And then the next spring after that, usually you will start to see a decline in your tree's health, like browning top or sloughing bark. Also, over winter, woodpeckers love to eat the larvae that are residing right under the bark. So woodpeckers often cause a lot of bark slough. Some other damaging agents that we'll have you guys look for is number 1, diplodia. We already mentioned that we thought diplodia was our major damaging factor earlier, but it is not. But it is a good one to look out for. It damages it's a fungus that damages the new shoots of the ponderosa tree, misforming them and causing them to look all weird. But if you can't look at the tops of your trees or at the new shoots, you can always look at cones at the bottom of your tree. And if your cone has these little tiny black spots on them, you may have diplodia on your tree. I don't know if you guys want to pass these around or not. Come up and look at the afterwards.
It helps to use a magnifying glass. Hard to see.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we got a little magnifying glass over there too. Groovy. Pretty common one that you see on 2 and 3 needle pines is gull rust. So here's an example of gull rust. It's also a fungus that infects the stem of tree branches, and as the tree tries to fight off the infection, it'll grow this huge canker around it to kind of try and wall it off. These are pretty common. You might see them on other trees besides ponderosas, especially lodgepole pines. So you can come up and look at that if you want to. And then two others that are pretty common around here are conchs. So if there are conchs or mushrooms on the outside of the tree, that could indicate that the tree is rotting on the inside or has root rot. So that's a good one to keep an eye out for. And last but not least is dwarf mistletoe. This is a parasite that causes irregular branching. So it'll cause these huge like brooms of branches on one side of the tree. Yeah, and it basically just weakens the tree defense and yeah, doesn't exactly kill the tree, but it weakens it. Ruby, Abby's next with some
I have a
information.
question about it.
Oh, we have a question.
This will kind of. So, well,
Yeah, I think so. It's actually down by Flathead Lake, down past Big Fork. There's a lot of it out there. But it doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, it's not as common as the other.
does it look the same as it does on?
Yeah.
One quick question about the beetle, you may have mentioned this. Is this a native species or is it something that's coming into our area that we used to be here?
No, it is a native species.
Okay.
But they are becoming more of a damaging agent due to climate change. Because usually the long cold winters will reduce their survival rate. So usually they're not as big of a problem and not having these huge outbreaks. But now with warmer winters, they are becoming more of a problem. Yeah. Any other questions before I run away? Okay, groovy.
Hi, I'm Abby, and I'm going to walk you through how to do a survey. So if you have a smartphone or a tablet with you and you want to walk through it with us, you can do that. And I think that's probably the best way to learn.
So
Yeah, and there's a.
talk about how to do it.
All right, so if you open up your camera on your phone and hold it over the QR code, there's some stickers on the table and some info sheets that have a QR code. And if you need help, raise your hand and someone can come by and help you out.
And it'll take a little time to load initially.
And I can walk quickly through it with this one. There's stickers or the paper, it's gonna work. So if you bring up your camera app, this is the Apple device, but if you scan the QR code, I can tap the opening Chrome. Everybody's phone is gonna be a little bit different. Some phones may work,
And
some may
in
not.
case you do have a really older phone, it might not work without a QR reader app. But if you're on the email list, we can send you a link to the site.
And when you first pull it up, it's going to ask about sharing your location. And if you can just go ahead and allow that, as that's how we're going to be tracking the trees where they're at and what areas are affected.
Yeah.
So while we're doing this, I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
So is there any way someone can kill beetles if they're in their tree?
We're going to cover some of that. Yeah, we'll get there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You can use my phone too if it doesn't work. Yeah, I really don't see. I think it's very rare actually. Right.
I like organic and like all the mentality, you know, because really like biology and really like those things, so I don't perspective, but.
No, the way that this form is set up through a web browser, you do have to be connected to the internet to actually do the survey.
Yeah.
All right, so every time you pull up the survey, you're gonna have a little helpful piece here that will help you identify Ponderosas, just in case you forget. And the first thing we're gonna have you do is set your location. And so for I'm on an iPad, but for most phones, you have to click into the map for it to show you these options on the side. And we want to click the crosshair button, which is this one right here. Kind of looks like a target. And that will bring you up to where you are.
Well, for many of you guys on the phone, like Debbie said, just touch the map. So there's press set location, that makes it bigger. And then now you see the little kind of scope across there. Target jump that.
And then I always like try to make sure that where it's putting me is the right place. Because sometimes your phone might not be connecting correctly. And so just logically make sure, oh yeah, I'm near that river, I'm near that building. And sometimes it helps if you like click the little crosshair more than once.
Do you need help?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I need a young person. Says it can't find my location.
Okay. So. You might have to do your settings.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll go to settings.
Yeah. Opening it.
And then, so then for those of you guys who have the map, you have to hit the on the top right. Probably Safari to go back to the survey. Anybody need help with?
Is there a time for getting? That makes sense. Otherwise, some you would just, you if everybody gets a location as they could for now.
Okay, next, you just took your location, you're standing beside your imaginary tree. And you're gonna take a picture looking straight up at the top of your tree. If you're under your tree, you're gonna look up, take a picture. Then you're gonna determine what size your tree is. If it's a small tree, can you wrap your hands around it? If it's a medium tree, you can wrap your arms. If it's a large tree and you can't connect your hands. Go ahead and take tree size. And then you're gonna set kind of what landscape it is. Is it in a forest? Is it maybe in a golf course? And I'm kind of asking these questions because in a forest, no one's out there watering, no one's out there fertilizing, versus like maybe in your yard, it's getting a lot of water. A golf course, maybe it's getting a lot of fertilizer. Is it in the side water, or is it maybe in an urban area? So go ahead and pick one of those. And then we're gonna ask, has the forest been thinned? So if this is on your property, you know, you can, maybe if it's been thinned recently, if you're out on public land and you're seeing, it's a pretty sparse forest, you can see stumps, then you know it's been thinned recently. And then you can fill out whether or not it's been fertilized in the past 3 years. And if you're unsure, that's fine, just go ahead and click unsure. Then we're gonna figure out, is your group in a group, or is it just by itself? And if you pick group, it's gonna give you a couple additional questions, such as your canopy's position. So if it's a dominant tree, it's gonna be the biggest tree out there. It's gonna be the tallest. If it's co-dominant, maybe there's 2 trees and they're about the same size. If it's intermediate, it's under some trees, but it's still getting some light. And then if it's suppressed, it's completely covered by other trees. And then you're going to pick whether or not your tree is in the interior of a group or on the exterior. And we found with the hail damage, the trees on the exterior were getting more damage. And now I'm going to show you how to figure out how densely populated the stand is. So everyone go ahead and put your thumb out. And I like to close one eye. And now hold it over one of these log sections. If the log is wider than your thumb, that's going to be number 1. And then you're going to go around in a circle and you're going to count every log that is bigger than your thumb. Remember where you started. And that is the number you're going to put in for this question. Does anyone have any questions on that specific?
So you're counting only ponderosas? Or
No, you're
peppers?
counting all trees bigger than
Okay.
thumb, not just ponderosas. And so big trees, if you have a lot of big trees, you're going to have more trees that are included. If you have a bunch of little trees, they don't have to be very close to you for them to be included. Number. Then you're going to just kind of look at the tree and see if, does it look like a healthy tree? Is it nice and full, nice and green? Are all the limbs only on one side? Maybe that tree doesn't look so hot. Or is there only a couple little branches at the very top? That's not a very healthy tree. So you're gonna pick one of those. And then we're gonna look at beetle exit holes. And we can look at some of these logs for examples. And you can see the holes that are on them. And if you do see holes that are present, we're gonna click yes. And then we're gonna use a sheet of paper to determine about how many are in that area. So you don't have to carry a piece of paper with you, but this is about the dimension size we're going to look at. And you'll hold it out at just like about arm's length, about, eye level, and just kind of get a rough estimate of how many holes you're seeing. Oh, maybe there's only 1 or 2, or maybe there's so many you can't even count that many, and you just kind of estimate. Now we're going to check off any other conditions we might notice on the tree, such as gall rust, diplodia, mistletoe, conchs, scars, pitch tubes, which there's good example of pitch tubes on the back 2 logs, sloughing bark, and woodpecker holes. Then we're going to step far enough away from the tree to get a good picture of it. Something to get the whole tree in the picture. And once you're back away, you can kind of determine the percentage of brown needles there are. And for most ponderosas this time of year, there's going to be some brown needles because it's just that time of year where they lose some naturally. But if you have diplodia, those needles will turn brown and they will stay on the tree. So those will not fall off. I don't know if for people who've noticed in Big Fork, that area has a lot of diplodia, so those needles have been on there for a good year and a half. And they're just hanging out. And then you can add any additional comments you'd like about your tree. If you would like us to continue monitoring your tree, you can let us know if we can access that area, we can contact you and maybe come out and do further information and surveys. And you can leave your contact info. All right, let's go ahead and submit. And once you submitted, you're like, oh man, that was so much fun. I want to do another tree. Then you're gonna walk 100 feet away from your tree. That way the location isn't right on top of each other because it's not 100% accurate. And you're gonna just click the press here. And that should reload the survey for you to do another one. Does anyone have any questions on the survey?
I think on the beetle forward, it said, on the form, it says how many large holes.
Yeah.
And what size hole, large? What's the threshold of it?
So, kind of, if you look at the logs that are just through the room, you see the main holes, they're about the size of the drain right.
Okay.
So those ones are the ones that we're looking at.
Okay.
Easy to see on this one.
Kind of big,
Yeah.
but at some point, especially on dead trees, you'll get even much larger holes and they're gonna show up and that's what we're trying to deal with. It's kind of a secondary beetle that come in after the tree's already there.
So we're looking for like 2 to 5 meters. Something like that, yeah.
Yes.
But that size that we're seeing right now.
When you start getting.
Yes.
Fingers.
So we're gonna hold it out.
That's what more.
Remember your location. You're going to look at each tree, any species, and if it's wider than your thumb, you're gonna count. So this would be 1. Oh, that one's in 2. That's gonna be 2, 3, 4. No trees. 5. I started there. Yes.
And you're,
Yeah.
you're looking broadly around you.
Yeah.
But sometimes ones that are easy to miss are the real big ones that are just kind of, oh, I wasn't paying attention 30 feet. So he's looking 15 feet, but there was a big one that actually was wider than so.
Yeah,
a
and
lot of
so-
you guys are wondering what that is. Go ahead.
If you hold up, like, try holding your thumb out and looking at this, this is your thumb's gonna completely cover. So this would not be included in your count.
And make sure you hold your thumbs straight out.
Yeah.
So.
So if I'm walking around and there's a stand of Ponderosas, do I just randomly pick one in there?
Yes, yeah, try to pick, as randomly as you can.
Okay, and then you walk 100 feet away if you're gonna do another one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
So you always use
That, or you could save the form as a link, either to favorites or to your home screen. But we do have stickers here that you guys can have. Don't put the stickers on your back of your phone. Couldn't hurt. QR code out.
Sure.
And then the water bottle. Nobody here did that. And then the water bottles, you could put it on there, but they're not very waterproof, so they do kind of deteriorate after the time on the water bottle. So, I don't know, pick them where it's good.
You don't spill your water bottle.
Yeah. Neat and tidy.
Any other survey questions?
One thing that's really important to, which Abby mentioned, is that location piece. So, our main goal is to kind of get an idea of the general extent, the geographic extent of pine health, either healthy or maybe declining health or dead trees. And also I'll talk about this at the end too, is we're not just looking for dead trees. We're looking for an evaluation of all ponderosa pines. So it's okay if they're all healthy. That's something we want to know. And then maybe next year, maybe something's changed. Maybe I need to go back to that site. Again, that's something we want to know, is the time element as well. So.
Thank you, Tim. Hi, my name's Diane. I'm one of the co-instructors of this course. So I'm going to sort of walk you through about, okay, now that you've gathered all this fabulous data, what are we actually going to do with it? So by using this data, we can look at finding patterns of potential Ponderosa health across the valley and look at what's contributing to this health. So obviously we'll use the results from the survey data, such as what kind of landscape setting was it? Was it in a forest? Was it near a golf course? Was it an urban area? And how is the health going to change based on some of the survey results? But we'll also pull in some other ancillary data describing spatial conditions throughout the valley, such as soil type. So we're interested in, does a pine do better in a gravelly versus sandy versus loamy soil? Or also what kind of landscape position is the tree located in? So does trees that are on south facing slopes on steep areas do better than something that's in a relatively flat area, or something that's maybe on a north facing slope that gets more moisture theoretically? In addition, we'll all look the proximity to water, both surface water and groundwater. We have a fairly decent depth to water table map for the Flathead Valley. So we'll look at these other key landscape attributes to help us examine the patterns of the health that you guys will help us describe throughout the valley. So we hope using this information, we can come up with some sort of predictive model and maybe lead ourselves into some forest management considerations. So that is one part of a project. And what we're just recently getting into is using remote sensing or imagery to help us quantify stress over a large area. So instead of just looking at a single tree, here's the Big Fork area, where we have 6 or 7 points where we collected some data. Using the imagery collected from drones, airplanes, satellites, and so forth, we can classify this whole area and come up with a good estimate of vegetation health for Ponderosa pine health for this area. So we're moving from a single point to the entire landscape. So how do we go about doing this? Well, the imagery has unique spectral characteristics. Like when you take a cell phone, it's cell phone image, you see your reds, blues, greens, and make up an image. Well, we can pick apart that in the imagery and help it train the computer to pull out certain stresses of vegetation. So, for example, here's a picture of a Ponderosa pine stand seen around Big Fork, a lot of browning in the needles. And this is what it looks like from a satellite imagery. So obviously browning you see on the ground, and we're picking up that browning in the satellite image. So we're able to use the computer to look for this browning and come up with an algorithm or train the computer to pull that out. So here's what we ran through the computer. So where it's red, orange, yellow, those trees are really stressed. Where you see green trees, they're doing fairly well. So we can use this type of analysis to cover very large areas, and using the imagery, it's relatively cheap compared to if we were paid to go out in the field to collect all this data. So it's another tool in our toolbox to quantify the stress of the pines throughout the valley. So initially, we're going to focus on the Big Fork area because that's where we started and initiated this project. So it's cool, you can go back in time and grab archival imagery from satellites. So this is a satellite image around Big Fork that was collected in 2019. So obviously before the hailstorm, all the trees look green and healthy and doing great. And this was a satellite imagery acquired about a month after the storm. So here you can easily see the browning of those pine trees that we're able to pick up. And this is the same area acquired 1 year later, August 1st. And we still see, as Abby said, the brown needles are still hanging on. So we can't see much change from about a year after the storm. So we hope to gather more imagery. We'll definitely get another image next summer. And then we hope to utilize some drone imagery to get more detail. But just as a synopsis, here's that same classification of vegetation health over this area. Once again, reds, orange, yellows are the stressed trees. So using the citizen science app can actually help us ground truth the reality of what the computer is telling us. It's always good to do that, talking back and forth, but using the citizen science app coupled with the imagery will give us a good depiction of what is happening with our Ponderosa pines throughout the valley. So it's just some cool tools that we'll be able to access and continue to monitor this long term. But ultimately, you might want to know, what can I do with my trees? So I'm going to hand that off to Becca.
All right, so if you have land with Ponderosa or you have Ponderosa in front of your house, you're probably wondering, what can I do to help my poor tree? So if you're looking at a Ponderosa with the Diplodea, the most important thing is to look for signs of growth because that means that the tree is recovering. Tree recovery will increase with the decrease of stress. So the more stressed a tree is, the more likely it is to just keep getting sick. And unfortunately, pruning dead branches and needles will not increase the health of the tree. So there's no point for that, but dead trees are recommended to be removed, a fully dead tree. Looking at a tree, 80% or more of its needles are starting to brown. There's not a chance of recovery for it. But yeah. All right, looking at the prevention and suppression of beetles. The biggest thing is thinning. So 20 to 25 feet on larger trees and 12 to 15 feet on smaller trees or saplings is the most important thing you can do for your tree. Watering trees during high temperatures. Last few summers there's been drought, so making sure that your tree, you know, has enough water to be able to defend itself against insect and disease. And that's like per tree. Not, you don't have to water a whole stand or forest or trees. Avoid fertilization. High levels of nitrogen in the soil have been linked to the increase of Diplodea also. And if you're experiencing this on a large scale, so you know, own a lot of property or you just have a huge stand of Ponderosa, thinning or logging, again, is recommended, and pyramid mountain lumber will take Ponderosa. And again, that's on a larger scale, but the contact for that is Zoe Leak, and we do have that on the board also. And our DNRC service forester for the region, Holly McKenzie, will also come out and take a look at your property if you are curious. All right, you'll also hear about verbenome patches, which for Western pine beetle, there are no hormones that work. Mountain pine beetle, you do have bubble patches that work, and you can spray with carbaryl. That will also work for Western pine beetle, is carbaryl, but that's not as effective on a large scale. That would be more for, you know, one tree, because it is something you can do yourself, but most of the time you'd have to pay to get it done. So that's more like, you know, is there one tree I want to save? I'll spray. Right, any questions?
What trees do the mountain beetles go after?
They do go after Ponderosa as well, but they're further east, I believe. They do, and higher elevation also. It's a big thing.
They love lodgepole. Very devastated on lodgepole. They do impact Ponderosa as well.
Anything else? All right. Then take it away.
Would you mind going back to the DNRC contact? So I can.
Yeah, we do have it on the board as well.
Yeah.
Well, we can put it there too.
Yeah.
And see. She's a service forester and they provide the landowner assistance, private forest landowners. Great person contact. Also, as Becca mentioned, pyramid mountain lumber. One of the challenges we have with Ponderosa pine is that there's not a good local market for the trees. So if you're actually interested in thinning your trees, which is the recommended approach to reduce the stand density, that it may be challenging to do so because Weyerhaeuser or Stultz and those folks aren't actually buying the Ponderosa pine. Pyramid is out of Cedar Lake, so it's gonna be kind of costly to transport it there. And as a result, you're not gonna get rich typically if you do a tenant operation, and it may actually result in a cost to the landowner. But if you're thinking of thinning or know somebody who is, Holly can certainly help with that kind of management plan development and understand what your objectives are and walking you down the path of maybe implementing that particular plan. All right. All right. So just to kind of close things a little bit. I know you guys are here because you read a paper in the article, or read an article in the paper, or saw something maybe on social media. Or you know what it was all about. You just want to learn. And if your goal here is to just learn and not do any survey, that's perfectly fine. But if you want to actually contribute data to this particular project, map as little or as much as you want. Go start mapping trees. Hopefully they're all happy trees. So, and I forgot the Bob Ross tree at the end. Shoot. But ultimately that's kind of our goal, is to have happy, healthy trees. Hopefully we can get an understanding of where that's occurring and where maybe it's not throughout a particular landscape. Just to reiterate, I mentioned this earlier, is that we do want all trees, not just the sick and dying ones. We want to know where the healthy ones are. And we'll be biased towards inventorying the big dead trees. So try to kind of not bias your selection of individual trees. It would be good to have a kind of a cross size selection. So maybe smaller trees, medium-sized trees, big trees, as well as really good vibrant trees versus maybe not so good trees. And that's just going to help us analyze the data a little bit more thoroughly once we get to that point. I mentioned this also earlier too, is that if there's a stand that you visited and already collected a tree or two, but you've noticed maybe a year and a half later, this will be an ongoing project that you want to add new trees to that data set, because now that stand might be declining. By all means, go ahead and do that. So each one of your sample points is going to be timestamped. We can include that in our model of progression over time as well. And then also spread the word. So if you have classmates that might want to do this, or neighbors that might want to do this too, you don't necessarily have to attend the training. You can just scan that QR code, and the form is fairly intuitive, as long as you get that location right. That's the key part, is knowing how to get that location correct. But the rest of the survey itself is fairly intuitive, except for that thumb thing. And if you choose not to do the thumb thing, yeah, that's not required, right?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. That's okay too. That just gives us an indication of the stocking level of the stand. So the more trees you count that are bigger than your thumb, the greater utilization, the more competition that occurs with the actual stand. So generally, to combat any of those, a lower stocking level is going to be an ideal situation for a healthy tree. All right, and we do have sign-up sheets. Most of you guys signed in when you came in. If you haven't, be sure to include your name and email. I'll send out a link to this developing story map, which I'm going to go to in just a moment to show you specifically what it is. So this name is terrible web link, but that's why I'm going to email it to you. So make sure I have an adequate email for you guys. Now, yeah, I'm just going to go to this website real quick and just kind of talk about it briefly. It's under development. It was just something that was kind of thrown together for tonight, and kind of gives you just a general background on what's happening and why this project was initiated, how you can get involved. So the link is there either through the QR code or a direct link to the survey form, as well as a few other resources. So for example, if you need to grant access to your location services, either through Safari on an Apple device or in an Android device, you get a little bit of a better accuracy of position if you turn off your Google location. Not essential, but it does help. It just relies then on the GPS locations rather than cell tower locations and Wi-Fi locations. Kind of confusing, but just know if you turn that off, it'll help you or help the location. And this is a little video that can walk you through that particular process. Again, this is going to be a link to the results as well. This is that dashboard that I already showed you guys. So this will be a direct access to your points. So for those of you guys who added any points tonight, we can zoom in. Notice Ross Hall, there's a lot of trees that are growing out of the roof here. So we're going to get rid of those trees.
So you can see how much variation in the GPS location there does occur. So that's why we want, if you sample more trees, at least 100 feet apart.
Yeah. And GPS is terrible inside a building
Yeah.
anyways, but yeah. But there's Abby's picture that she took with the light. So again, your data will show up in real time, which is pretty cool. That's one thing that's amazes me, having grown up in GIS for 20 some years. It's like, that's just awesome.
It is.
Real data, real time that you are contributing. I know it's more impressive to me than it is probably you, but it's awesome. There's some just general information about western white pine or western pine beetle. And there's 2 videos by the Oregon Department of Forestry. Again, once you check this out and share it with your friends, they can come here and learn more. Some general key points about pine beetle and Ponderosa. Old age, overcrowding, and drought. Basically, stressed trees are going to be susceptible. And our goal is to try to maybe reduce that stress, primarily through tending. Reducing hazards by removing high-risk trees, ones that show a crown that might be receding, kind of like my head. But a crown that's receding, that's going to show that the tree is maybe not in its best form. Obviously, if it's a forest tree, that canopy is going to be shorter because it has all that competition around it. But if it gets so small, it may not be able to be adequate enough to support the biological needs of the tree itself. So it'll be stressed. And then thin to maintain vigor. Stand management, here's some reminders for you guys, just some of that space and recommendations that DNRC puts out there of 20 to 25 feet. For big trees, 12 to 15, and so forth. Monitoring some things to look for. So within the bark itself, looking for these little exit holes. Under the bark, looking for these zigzaggy drunken sailor galleries. Just wandering around. And then some resources for you as well. So there's a couple fact sheets that these Forest Service put out, as well as Holly's contact information there. So with that said, I just want to point out that all these logs in here are actually from our campus. So all this beetle damage that you're seeing is actually being impacted here on campus as well. And we do have some beautiful Ponderosas, and if you're in that same community, you have some too. So with that, we're probably going to have to do some tending, because what do you see? Big trees that are close, right? That's setting the stage for potentially a catastrophic failure of that stand in the future. So these guys are actually going to be putting together a management plan this semester, and we're going to propose that plan to our college board of trustees, president, and hopefully we can maybe get some tending operations there on campus, ideally. And that's about it for that resource. Again, I'll email you a link to that resource. But there's the URL or the web address if you, it's terrible. Anyways, I'll email that out to you. One thing I do want to say is just a little recognition of our second year natural resource students, that they did a phenomenal job in preparing this and putting together the survey application. And awesome job, guys. Thank you. And just to plug in a shameless commercial break, is our natural resources and management and conservation program here on campus is a really great program. We have students that are employed by a lot of our natural resources agencies and organizations throughout Montana. And you were with DNRC, Forest Service, a little bit with Forest Service, and you're gonna soar in the computer GIS things in your future, so. Anyways, there's a lot of demand for natural resource students, so if you know anybody who likes to spend time in the woods. Looking for maybe a change in their life, consider sending them to talk to us here at the natural resources area at Platte Valley Community College, so. That's, I think, all I got. Do you guys have any? More to add? Any more questions in general? Thoughts? Yes.
I have one, on your survey, you had a picture of sloughing bark,
Oh, yeah,
and I know it was taken down there.
it was.
Was that because there were beetles and the woodpeckers got rid of all the bark around?
Yeah, so the beetles start up in the cambium, which is kind of right between the bark and the wood, that real fragile layer that they girdle. Then eventually they move to the middle bark area, and that's whenever the woodpeckers are kind of just going to town.
So
And they're
those just
sloughing
gonna
them off,
die?
getting to the, yeah, those are,
Yeah.
they're dead,
Okay,
yeah.
because there were a number of them close together when
Mhm.
that was happening.
Yeah, there's kind of a cluster
Yeah.
epicenter down there right now, and it's getting bigger, and we'll see how that progresses, and whether or not we can do any tendon that's gonna intervene
Uh-huh.
within the time frame that's gonna be appropriate, I'm not sure. But it's significant. Like Bella said, one of the big things is to actually kind of cause a little bit of a mitigation on these beetles. It's gonna be that long-term, very cold weather period. So a good -20 degrees or so for several days would be great. We got there almost. We got -30 for like one day last year. But if we had maybe several more days of those, it would have been a great setup to kind of cool this down a little bit. Any other questions, thoughts?
What's the actual like geographical area you're interested in? I know you said it's the valley, but like, does that include some Forest Service under the edges and like West Valley or what?
Wherever you want to map.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love data. So go out and collect.
And because it's geographically located, if it's not pertinent to a research question we're gonna ask,
Yeah.
we can not include it,
Right.
but anywhere is certainly
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
You just have to be in service too.
Yeah, they have one more app service.
Yeah. Over. You're not in service.
It's gonna limit, yeah, it's gonna limit you in the box and.
Yes, it will. We could set it up under the survey 123 application where you can actually do some offline mapping, but we chose not to go down that path because it requires you to download an app and do some clunky things with it. For science, citizen science, it just felt it wouldn't be too appropriate to do. So just through a web browser is a more streamlined approach, but that does require you to do online. Cool. Well, thank you guys for taking your time tonight to be here, and let us know if you have any questions. I'll follow up with an email with some additional information. I am gonna go hunting next week, so I might not be till after that time frame. So anyways, thank you. Thanks. Feel free to ask the next.
Yeah, yeah, on the way out. Wow.
What are you hunting for? What are you gonna go hunting for? Antelope?
Oh, you do get credit.
Oh, you're welcome.
I think so.
Sorry, I didn't want to get that recorded, so.
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
Stop recording.
Yeah.